Welcome to the Genesis Science Report. I'm David Rives, and on tonight's show, we'll explore how recent scientific discoveries are aligning more and more with the biblical narratives. Joining us will be a nuclear engineer to discuss groundbreaking astronomical findings of massive ancient galaxies that challenge the viability of the Big Bang Theory. We'll also hear from a forensic scientist about Viking bones discovered in England and why they have sparked ongoing debate. Now, these discussions promise to highlight the harmony between science and Scripture, challenging the conventional mainstream theories. But first, let's explore the life and ideas of Gordon Childe, the renowned archaeologist who significantly influenced our modern view of the rise of civilizations. Here's what Louis Benford says of Childe. Gordon Childe's legacy extends far beyond his own writings. He trained and inspired a generation of archaeologists who went on to make their own significant contributions to the field. His influence can be felt in virtually every aspect of modern archaeological theory and practice. Now, as can be expected, the Genesis narrative and biblical flood both account for the rise of civilization from a very different perspective than the humanist, so-called empiricist view of human history as offered by Gordon Childe. Now, while we who believe Scripture to be inspired view the biblical account as solid footing, Childe took a very humanistic approach to history and the development of civilization. Now, this is important because his ideas underpin a good deal about ancient history, even to this day. He says, the scientific method is the only reliable way of understanding the world. It is based on observation, experimentation, and rational analysis. It's the best tool we have for uncovering the truths about the universe and our place in it. Listen, I think that sounds like a great idea. And while we have a great appreciation for the scientific method, we have a firm belief that as we place our hope in the foundational, immovable truth of the Bible, it's not going to lead us astray. It will, in fact, lead us to greater scientific, archaeological, and spiritual truth. So Childe, on the other hand, says this in regard to the Bible and other religious texts. He said, religious texts are rich sources of cultural and historical information. However, they must be interpreted with caution, taking into account their historical context and the cultural milieu in which they were written. Now, I agree with his statement when it comes to religious texts, but not when it comes to texts that have stood up to historical scrutiny, like the biblical record. There's a big difference between religious texts and the Bible. So in other words, Childe's foundational approach to the development of society is purely based on what can be observed in the natural world through archaeology and other means. He also states that Darwinian theory was a necessary foundation for his view of civilizational development. Quote, the mental powers that enable men to construct the realm of civilization can only be understood as products of evolution. They have slowly evolved through the long process of organic and cultural evolution that began with the origin of life itself. So, where did this approach to archaeology and ancient history lead Childe? We know two things for sure. Well, it first led him to Marxism, and then, eventually, to suicide. And ultimately, that is what happens to a person and to society when they reject God's Word and try to explain reality from a different lens. Childe, because he underpinned his work with Darwinism and eventually Marxism, couldn't see what was right in front of him. He was obviously a master at his work and often saw things that should have been clues to intelligently designed humans functioning from early history with brilliance. Here's one of his observations. The new Stone Age farmers were in no sense primitive. They had all the essentials of a civilized society: urban centers, specialized crafts, social classes, and political organization. This observation fits pretty well with the Word of God. You see, the biblical perspective tells of a complex and sophisticated antediluvian society that becomes grossly sinful and rebellious towards God's law. It then progresses to the subsequent global flood, which wiped out society, the post-diluvian table of nations, and the dispersion of the nations throughout the earth after God's judgment at the Tower of Babel. And then society begins to rebuild. Well, essentially, Childe observed a society with sophistication, but because of evolutionary theory, his conclusions were wrong. He didn't see people that were recovering from a global catastrophe. He saw civilization slowly evolving over time, reaching greater levels of sophistication. Childe's view is summed up here. Civilization is not a natural state of humanity. It is the result of human effort and ingenuity. You see, ultimately, Childe concluded that we're building another Tower of Babel. Civilization is simply the result of human effort. He didn't see a place for God in his story, so it led him toward a godless and prideful end. His life ended in loneliness, in grief, and suicide. And his ideas bear the same fruit of hopelessness in the generation that receives them. But you know, we can take another road, because when we view history through the lens of redemption, not only does it have a sense of coherence, it also offers us the joy of relationship with God, showing that there is true meaning to history. We've been struggling with alarming statistics for suicide over the past dozen years, and there is a correlation with this and the rise in popularity of humanist principles. God's purpose for humanity brings glory to Himself, but we are a part of the story from the beginning. You see, He creates us in His image. Then He invites us into a relationship. He provides us with law so that we know how to interact. He judges evil. And then finally, He comes to humanity and He offers His life that we may live with Him forever. This is the true story of humanity. And this story brings hope and fulfillment. Now, when we return to the Genesis Science Report, I'll be answering a viewer question regarding the biblical definition of Leviathan. So stick around. We'll be right back. Just outside Nashville, the Wonder Center and Science Museum, with a top 10 planetarium, kids' hands-on activities, the teen favorite 1 million volt musical Tesla show. It's worlds of fun for the entire family. Experience the wonder. Explore the science. Inspire curiosity. Embark on adventure. The Wonder Center and Science Museum. Friends of Genesis Science Network, we started this channel to make an impact in the lives of both Christians and inquiring skeptics around the world. It has done that in unbelievable ways. Now, one of our viewers wrote, "I've been watching your channel for nearly a week now, and I would like you to know the blessing that it's been to me. I've never had the finances or the opportunity to attend a university, but I've been a believer for the last 37 years. Your channel has done more for my understanding of my faith than any book I've read save the Bible, and I feel like I'm finally able to attend the lecture classes I've always wanted to. Thank you so much for your ministry." I want to thank you for your generous support. GSN is no simple project and requires monthly commitments to keep it on the air. Please consider becoming a partner with us today. Just call 931-212-7990 or click Give on our website. We are making a difference. I'm David Rives, and you're watching the Genesis Science Network. The work of His hands. Let's look at photography of the Earth from space with a NASA astronaut.
We orbit the Earth 16 times a day. My cumulative time in space is 534 days, so I'll let you do the math.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
What the message we hear, there's absolutely no conflict between science and Scripture.
Absolutely. On wonders without number. Welcome back to the Genesis Science Report. This week's question comes from Maddie on TikTok. Maddie asks, do you think that the Bible speaks of one single Leviathan or multiple? Was it a dinosaur or was it a fallen demon creature? Thanks for the question, Maddie. Listen, when it comes to Leviathan, the Leviathan is spoken of, I think, 5 times throughout the Bible, some in Isaiah. Sometimes we read about this creature in Job, and it is possible that it was an overarching term which could have meant both. But when we look at the Leviathan as an actual creature, what we find is that it does appear to be this giant dragon that was a real, possibly a large predator animal living in the deep ocean, so fierce that none dare stir him up. It talks about how you could throw spears at it and the spears would bounce right off. Many times when we look at Leviathan in nature and in the paleontological record, there is a good possibility that it's referring to some sort of a tylosaur, maybe a mosasaur, perhaps a Deinosuchus, a giant super croc. We don't know exactly, but the passage in Job seems to be talking about an actual creature, a dragon in the deep. And that should be taken, again, we may not know exactly what it is, but that should be taken as more literal because it's in the same passage where it mentions the animal Behemoth, which is more than likely a long-necked dinosaur-like creature. We love interacting with our audience, so don't hesitate to share your questions with us on social media or send them via email to comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. If you found this Q&A fascinating, you're definitely going to want to check out this week's featured resource. Behemoth and Leviathan. The book by Dave Miller dives into the biblical references to these two mysterious beasts, exploring whether these descriptions are mythological, whether they're hyperbolic, or literal representations. By fleshing out the description of Behemoth and Leviathan in the biblical text, readers are invited to reconsider these creatures as tangible entities that actually roamed the earth in ancient times. Now, this book is not only a compelling exploration of biblical creatures, but also serves as a tool for reaffirming faith in the Scripture and illuminating the extraordinary relationship between the natural world and our divine Creator. Now, if you're intrigued by the mysteries contained within the Bible and the wonders of creation, this book is a valuable read that promises to deepen your appreciation for the marvels of God's handiwork. You can find your copy of Behemoth and Leviathan at the Creation Superstore by visiting creationsuperstore.com or calling 931-212-7990. And it's that time again. That's right, the Kids Corner. This week, we're exploring living fossils. Now, living fossils are plants and creatures that are found in rocks, but they also can be found living today. Now, in both forms, living and fossilized, they look really similar. The list of examples of living fossils is quite extensive, with literally thousands of examples showing barely any change through time. So this would indicate that they haven't evolved at all. One of the most famous examples of a living fossil is the coelacanth fish. Now, some people had theorized that the coelacanth, which is what you're looking at right here, with its fleshy lobe fins, maybe it slowly evolved into legs that allowed it to crawl onto dry land and become the ancestor of the amphibians. That was one of the theories. They noted that we found these fish as fossils in rocks that they thought were millions of years old. So when we look at these actual fossils, that says one thing. But hey, these paleontologists were in for a shock because we found out something entirely different in 1938 when a fisherman actually caught a living coelacanth. All of a sudden, they realized that this fish was not extinct after all. It looked something like this. Some of them were even a lot larger. But in more recent times, whole schools of coelacanth fish have been observed in very deep waters off the coasts of Africa and Indonesia. Now, the fins still look like fins, and no legs have developed, meaning that it hasn't evolved at all. You know what? I'm not surprised. Being a very deep water fish, it's an unlikely choice of a fish that would crawl out of the ocean, and it sure looks like they were created with a design that has not needed any improvement. This is exactly what we would expect based on the truth of the Bible. Now, maybe we've got the next budding scientist watching this program right now. So keep your eyes peeled for new discoveries and send in your comments and questions to comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. Maybe we'll read them off on the show. Coming up on the Genesis Science Report, discover why visitors are raving about their experiences at the Wonder Center, and stay tuned for some exciting updates on our ministry's latest developments. We're also going to be hearing from a nuclear engineer and a forensic scientist as they challenge mainstream scientific perspectives and explore the intersection of faith and research. You won't want to miss these thought-provoking discussions, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Join us at the Wonder Center and Science Museum for this month's Unwrapped event, where we feature expert speakers presenting scientific and biblical discoveries.
It pays to learn history, folks.
We cannot create an aircraft even close to what these birds can do.
This changes the way we do biology.
Discounted tickets are available for an after-hours adventure, including museum admission with kids' hands-on activities, a planetarium movie, Tesla experience, and pre-show entertainment. Perfect for the whole family.
What you believe about the history of the world is going to affect the way that you study the world today.
You see a mathematical order here. You see the orthogonal lines. You see the repeating patterns.
You don't understand what it takes to make a cell. That's serious engineering.
Come be inspired as you learn. The evening presentation is free, but seating is extremely limited, so RSVP immediately at wondercenter.org.
Squids in limestone in the middle of the Grand Canyon.
But the big problem is, how did those fossils get deposited in the middle of a 7-foot thick layer? According to the narrative, is something like 36 million years in duration. I'm replacing the narrative with some type of rapid smothering event.
On Wonders Without Number. Tune in to the Genesis Science Network Knowledge Block as you learn real, cutting-edge science, not evolutionary theories and agendas. Whether you're in junior or senior high, a homeschooler, or an adult looking for higher education, we bring you a fresh perspective each weekday. Our goal is to equip you with another block to build and strengthen your faith, giving you solid evidence. Join us each weekday at 11 a.m. Central. This week's first submission is from Jay, who says, I took 2 of my grandsons and my cousin for a guy's trip to the Wonder Center. We had an amazing time and really enjoyed the Tesla show, the planetarium, and all of the different exhibits. My grandsons enjoyed the interactions with the live lizards. The staff were great. Jay. Thanks, Jay. The live lizards, I think Carlos and Jeffrey, and probably Blackbeard as well, that you got to interact with. Of course, the Tesla experience is many people's favorite, but we appreciate y'all being here at the Wonder Center and Science Museum. Now, let's turn our attention to a revealing look at Charles Darwin's views on creation on this week's Genesis Science Minute. The famous evolutionist Charles Darwin is recognized as the father of human evolution. What most people don't know is that in the second edition of his book on the origin of species, he says there is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms or into one. Pressured by those who believed the biblical account of creation, he added the words "by the Creator." Most people did not buy what Darwin was selling. Later, here's what he had to say. I have long regretted that I truckled to public opinion and used a pentateuchal term of creation, by which I really meant appeared by some wholly unknown process. This is the two-faced man that many evolutionary scientists, truckling to public opinion, look up to as revolutionary in his field. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Rives Ministries at davidrives.com. David, R-I-V-E-S.com.
And now for our ministry update. We're excited to share some fantastic news about our geology exhibit. We recently added 2 incredible new displays that you won't want to miss. First, we have a detailed model of Mount St. Helens, which not only highlights the volcanic history of this iconic landmark, but also educates visitors about the geological processes that shaped it. Now, second, we are thrilled to introduce our new fluorescent mineral exhibit. This room showcases rocks that glow under UV light, providing a mesmerizing visual experience for visitors of all ages. Now, it's perfect for families and kids, sparking curiosity and wonder about the natural world around us. We encourage you to come see these remarkable additions and explore all that our geology exhibit has to offer. And lastly, during our most recent Wonders of Africa photo safari experience, we had the opportunity to film hours of brand new content that we are eager to share with you. From stunning wildlife encounters to breathtaking landscapes, our new adventure series promises to be an extraordinary journey. It's designed to engage the entire family. This content will combine education with adventure to make learning about God's creation both fun and inspiring. Make sure to keep up with our emails for announcements about this upcoming series, now in post-production. Get ready for an adventure that will ignite curiosity and broaden perspectives. Now, your prayers and generous support are the foundation of our mission, helping us educate and inspire and uplift others while pointing it all back to Christ. It's how we do everything that you see around us here. We hope that you consider becoming a monthly donor today. Your tax-deductible contributions are vital to sustaining our work. You can learn more on our website or by calling us at 931-212-7990. Now it's almost time to jump into the one-on-one interviews, but first, let's explore the mystery of the Behemoth from the book of Job and what it reveals about God's power on this week's Heavens Declare. Let's take a look right now.
In the book of Job, Yahweh, the Creator God, is speaking with Job, and he says, "Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox. Lo, now his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar tree. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief among the ways of God." Now, throughout the book of Job, we meet lots of different animals: wild goats, peacocks, ostriches, horses, hawks. God uses each animal as an illustration of His power as the creator and the sustainer. So these were all animals that Job knew, or else the point would have been wasted, wouldn't it? But what was this mysterious behemoth? Commentators throughout the years have suggested that maybe God was pointing to either elephants or possibly hippopotamuses. But we must remember, the Bible commentaries aren't inspired. The Bible itself is. But the only creature that we know of that seems to match the description of Behemoth is now extinct. In the fossil record, we find the bones of massive creatures that dwarf everything else that God made. These sauropods, known as long-necked dinosaurs, were strong, they were powerful, and they had massive tails. Our Creator is powerful enough to even create the most massive of beasts. You know, there's also a lesson for us as Christians to learn from this account. If God could create something as big as Behemoth, well, there's not a problem in this world too big for Him to handle. Remember that and be encouraged today. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
When we return, we'll be joined by Dr. Michael Houts, a distinguished nuclear scientist, to discuss critical discoveries in cosmology that are challenging conventional scientific theories. Learn how these findings align with biblical truth and what they mean for the future of science after the break. Hi, I'm David Rives, and I'm inviting you to visit the Creation Superstore, the largest Origins-related store in the world. Not only will you find every book and video title on creation versus evolution, science, but also every resource that teaches us about our origin and how it all takes us back to Genesis, a grand designer, the God of the Bible, and ultimately, yes, the gospel message. documentaries your family can trust, fossils, teaching videos, children's books, church Bible studies, homeschool supplements, and expert scientific literature. If you can't find a title, call us up and we'll add it. Normally, you'd have to visit dozens of sites to gain access to all of the titles that are out there, and then you would be at a loss to whether the book or video was worth the purchase. But not here. We've curated the best of the best into top 10 lists. And on some of my favorite products, you'll find the Rives rating, where I help guide you on the best resources available for not only those who love history, biblical studies, and creation science, but also great products at the layman level, easy to understand for those who are learning or want their children and grandchildren to be exposed to a biblical worldview. Just look for the Rives rating to find my personal favorites. Use the search bar to look up a topic or follow our menu to sort by ministry, subject, or author. Give us a call at 931-212-7990 as you're browsing. We have ministry volunteers who will do their best to assist you at all hours of the day and even help you place your order. Yes, a real person. Get ready for a secure shopping experience brought to you by the leaders of creation-based research. Your purchase goes towards ministry outreach and also supports the authors and organizations who publish the material, most of whom are personal friends and colleagues of mine. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Recently, an international team of astrophysicists discovered 6 galaxies in images from the James Webb Space Telescope. Now, this might not sound like a groundbreaking discovery, but there is something that makes this find kind of intriguing. You see, according to the Big Bang Theory, these galaxies should not exist. Joining us now to discuss these findings is Dr. Michael Houts, a researcher, a scientist who worked 11 years for Los Alamos National Laboratory and is currently nuclear research manager at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Now, Dr. Houts has led critical projects in space nuclear power and propulsion, receiving many accolades, including NASA's Distinguished Service Medal. Dr. Houts, thank you for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, David.
Absolutely. Look, it is always an honor to talk with you. I really appreciate your perspective on these things. So obviously, our universe is made up of billions upon billions of galaxies. So this article from Science Daily, why would the discovery of a few more galaxies leave secular scientists stumped?
Well, it just, it contradicts what was predicted. We're looking in areas where there weren't supposed to be galaxies. There probably weren't even supposed to be stars in some of the areas we were looking at. But sure enough, we're finding stars, we're finding galaxies, and that's and so again, that's to me, that's what's exciting about science. I mean, we're still learning. We're learning about God's creation, and a lot of times we'll predict things, and they're different than what we predicted. And so that's a good thing about science. And then and it stays good as long as we're free to adapt. We're free to say, okay, that was wrong. We were wrong there, and ideally, we're allowed to fully, I follow the science, I guess is what you would say. And so that's so the good news was, again, it's, I saw one of the articles and it's just say, wow, this is great. This is, sometimes you'll see things that you have to rewrite all the textbooks. This isn't all we expected. But the thing we have to be, of course, cautious about is when people say, yeah, but if we go this other direction, that might accidentally indicate God, or that's a little too consistent with the Bible, so we're not allowed to consider that. And that's where it gets, sometimes people talk about true science versus fake science. But if we follow the data, it's throughout history, it'll always end up being consistent with the Bible.
Mike, that's a great point, because when you think about true science versus fake science, there really isn't such a thing as fake science. There's only true science. Those are the facts, right? And then you have some scientists who kind of their interpretation of those facts leads to this fake understanding. But it's really, there's only one option, and that's true science, isn't it?
Yeah, there should be. Yeah. And that's, I know it's a bit of a play on words, but there's just so much again, what you could call just people interpreting things in a way that's very biased, very unscientific. Yeah. And so, but rather than having to say that full sentence, you'll hear people just start saying, well, you got true science. And that's when people are really looking at the evidence, seeing where that evidence leads us, what everything we should consider, get everything out on the table, versus the fake science is, well, no, here's the evidence, but you cannot consider God, you cannot consider the Bible. And so based on that, what can we do? And that approach, it falls short, and it's been falling short for centuries and continues to fall short.
Yeah, leave it all on the table, right, and see where the evidence is leading. We just had David Coppage on the show talking about Jupiter's moon Io and how its volcanic activity actually indicates a younger universe than some had previously thought. But it seems like this discovery of all of these galaxies seems to be part of a bigger trend where this new data is prompting us to question some of the things that we've just always assumed in science.
Right, and I would say just assumed, maybe you would say in the Big Bang Theory, or assumed, certain aspects, because again, true science, it's shouldn't be making assumptions like that. We should be looking at the data. I think you remember the famous open letter to the scientific community back in 2004, when people were saying, hey, we're making up 96% of the universe now to try to make the Big Bang work. And that was just the dark matter, dark energy components. I mean, you had inflation, you have all these, they were very polite in the letter. Of course, they say adjustable parameters, but people look at that and they say, hey, is this even a scientific theory? I mean, when you think about it, it's by definition not falsifiable. And that's one of the things we've seen with this, the latest data, the data from the James Webb is, no one would even think about, saying that, oh, this falsifies the Big Bang, because the way the Big Bang is set up, they'll just add some more adjustable parameters. We'll just do this. And you have everything ranging from, well, somehow stars and galaxies form much, much faster than we thought they could, to, I think one group, and I'm not sure if they're gaining much traction, but they're saying, well, maybe the universe is actually twice as old as we've been thinking it was. It's like 27 billion years old instead of 13 billion years. So, it's, but again, it's, you get into this area and just, if a theory is not falsifiable, by most definitions, it's not even a scientific theory. And I think that's one of the things we're running up against here. But that said, again, the articles I've seen, at least, have been pretty good about just, wow, this is completely different from what we expected. And so that's, again, what makes science and engineering exciting, if you run into things like that.
It is exciting because these kind of observations wouldn't have even been possible just a couple of years ago, until the James Webb came up. And in fact, in one of these articles, it mentions that these potential galaxies that we see are so massive that they should not be possible under current cosmological theory, which indicates that, hey, we've got to adjust. We've got to come up with a better cosmological theory. And I would posit that maybe it's time we don't just adjust the Big Bang model again. Maybe it's time we look for another model. But
yeah, and those were several hundred of the people that signed that open letter would agree with you completely. And a lot of them weren't, I'd say most of them probably weren't Bible believers, but they just said, hey, this is, we need to, this just isn't the right one. I mean, just based on all the data that's coming in. And so it's, so yeah, I agree with you completely on that statement.
So true. In fact, one of the co-authors of the of astrophysics at the University of Colorado Boulder in this article says, and I quote, "It's bananas." And I know that's not a scientific term, but it really is astounding, the things that we're finding. How should the faith community approach this? I mean, given these findings, it sounds like the current cosmological models probably need to be reevaluated. So what role could biblical insights possibly play into a reevaluation? What do we need to be looking at here?
Well, I think a lot of a good theory is, as Bible believers, is going to be consistent with the Bible, and so there's several biblically consistent cosmological theories that actually do a better job predicting what the universe would look like. In other words, predicting the universe looking the way it does now from an Earth that's 6,000 years old than the Big Bang's doing. And so we need to maybe develop some of those theories. A lot more thought can go into that. A lot of things we could be investigating, take into account our best current knowledge of physics, things like gravitational time dilation, other factors that could come into play, but also need to make sure we're not afraid to go into science and engineering. That's one trend I think we have to be nervous about, is just realize, if we have our know someone or have a child or someone that's really interested in science and engineering, encourage them to pursue that. But just let them know that, in many ways, this is still a mission field. They'll have people that are entrenched. They've confused atheism with science, and they'll think that, well, no, you can't. You're not allowed to talk about God. You're not allowed to talk about the Bible. That's not true. I mean, science should be the pursuit of truth, looking for what really happened. And again, throughout history, we see, I don't want to say like science catching up with the Bible. I mean, 500 years ago, a lot of people believed in spontaneous generation. Just the last few decades, we've learned so much about the complexity of life, just the idea that life could just make itself. I mean, it's been thoroughly disproven just in the last few decades. Information in the genome is another topic, just the last few decades. Just understanding DNA, how intricate the DNA molecule is, how well designed that molecule is, and to say that just spontaneously arose. Again, it goes against everything we know about true science. And so people are starting to realize that, hey, the Bible's had it right all along. And in many areas, true science is catching up, and hopefully that'll hold true in cosmology also. So I think, again, it's just good data for the people that put their faith in the Bible, but it's something we should embrace and look at what the observations are and put those back into the biblically consistent models, improve those models even more. So again, I think it's very exciting, but just let it all the options out on the table.
And Mike, that's one thing that's incredibly exciting about what you're doing is you are doing real research as a nuclear engineer. All of the things that you're observing, the way particles interact with each other, these types of things, that's adding to scientific information about the universe, about what we know so far. And again, I think it's really exciting how much progress we've made, again, like you said, just within the last decade or so, and it's all pointing back to design. So I guess my question would be, how do you think discoveries like these influence the conversation between the scientific community and those of us who might view the universe through a biblical lens? How do we interface better to say this is not an opposition of science versus faith? This is science and faith are so compatible, and we always have to make faith-based assumptions, faith-based beliefs, regardless of how we view the origin of the universe. If we view it in a Big Bang, well, we have to have faith that somehow the universe can come about by random chance processes and order can develop from chaos, right? If we believe in a creator, then we have to have faith that there is a God outside of nature that can create the universe. How do you think we should approach this to do better when we're communicating between scientists and those who are Christians?
Well, I think the key is just communicating. Don't get entrenched. Keep everything out on the table. Respectfully listen to each other's opinions. And I think discoveries like this that helps. And granted, that's on the other. I'll say the other side. But if there were non-believers that are seeing this, they have to realize, hey, stuff that we were really dogmatic about even a year or two ago. Well, hey, we're finding out that that wasn't correct. I mean, it's kind of like but they used to talk about things like junk DNA or things that we know now is completely wrong. Some people are really dogmatic about that, and so hopefully that just softens the discussion. So it is actual communication. People are actually talking with each other. And I should also mention the center I work at. There's a lot of Bible believers, a lot of people that have a very strong faith. They also do a very, very good research. Werner von Braun, he was a Bible believer. He kind of recoiled at the ideas that things were random or things weren't designed. I mean, he knew better than that. He was basically responsible for the Saturn V rocket that put us on the moon. So again, you have Butch Wilmore. He's one of the astronauts that's up there right now. I mean, I know it's a lot of media on that. He's one of the ones that I won't say sensational, but you get the stuck in space, and he was the commander of that module that went up. Well, he's a very strong Bible believer, young Earth creationist. I always like to point out 6,000 years is still a really long time, but it's referred to as young Earth creation. So he's a really strong Bible believer. People that know him, I mean, he is just incredible. Just really smart, really accomplished, very high achiever. People like that will also really facilitate just the discussion between people that may for whatever reason be I won't say against the Bible, but just for whatever reason just not as open to that as they might otherwise be. But discoveries like this, I think they really facilitate that. on our side as Christians, we need to make sure we're always speaking the truth in love the same way. Don't you have to stay away from the name calling and everything else, which again, I think credit most Bible believers realize they need to do that also, but keep it a cordial, open discussion.
I think that's so true. And, you know, Dr. Houts, again, what we find is that good scientific research does align with faith-based beliefs. Dr. Werner von Braun, you mentioned, wrote entire papers, did articles with so many different magazines back in the day, and he would speak of those types of things. So I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of at all. Like you said, we have to keep things cordial. Now, as someone deeply involved in both faith and science, do you have any ideas? What are some key questions that you hope that upcoming James Webb Telescope observations might help us answer? Do you have any predictions, anything that we should be looking for?
Okay, well, I'll give you my real optimistic one. Okay, so, we're, the heavens declare the glory of God, and it could well be that, we will be on Earth or in orbit and observing the heavens, and that, of course, points back to God, glorifies God. But I hope if we keep a very open mind, follow the data where it leads, follow the science, the true science where it actually leads, even if it strongly, again, glorifies God. It strongly points back to the Bible, strongly points back to God. I'm hopeful we'll be able to piece that together and figure out, did God design the universe so that we'll actually be able to travel around the universe? Okay, now that's the space geek in me coming out, but he may or may not have, but I think if we stay committed to theories that are really structured to try to be random, to try to not give any indication at all that there might be a God, well, we're never going to figure out that answer. And I would say it would it kind of serve us right, but I hate saying that because I'm part of us. So so I think it's so hopefully we'll see the discoveries that, again, if we just follow the science, follow the observations, look at all theories, whether they're biblically consistent. Those are the ones I think will be right, but follow the ones that are biblically inconsistent also. Just let the science go where it goes, and hopefully that'll lead to some really great discoveries.
I have faith that what we find whenever we follow the science is going to be consistent with the Bible, because it has a pretty good track record that stood up to the test of time. Dr. Houts, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was just a privilege to have you, and I'd love to have you back in the future.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir. And coming up, we will be shifting our focus from the vast reaches of outer space to mysteries of ancient history. I'll be speaking with a forensic scientist, Dr. Jim Johnson, about Viking bones discovered in England and the implications they have for carbon dating methods. We'll be right back after the break. We know that you want to have a deep faith in the Lord and to witness to those around you. To do that, you need tools and information to strengthen your faith using scientific discoveries that prove the Bible to be true. The problem is that atheists using evolutionary theories claim that they've refuted the Bible's accuracy. What's worse, the real facts are censored. If you don't have a PhD in science, you're often left feeling helpless when trying to defend your faith. But you need to be equipped to know the truth. For that reason, over the past 13 years, we've become the most trusted name in biblical scientific research, interfacing with nearly every top Christian organization in existence to distill and give you the true facts as they support your faith in Christ. Sign up for our weekly emails and free bi-monthly magazine. Consider becoming a partner with us as we reach the world with the truth of the Bible and the gospel message. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Squids in limestone in the middle of the Grand Canyon.
But the big problem is, how did those fossils get deposited in the middle of a 7-foot thick layer according to the narrative, is something like 36 million years in duration. I'm replacing the narrative with some type of rapid smothering event.
On Wonders Without Number. And welcome back to the Genesis Science Report. Joining us is Dr. James Johnson, Chief Academic Officer and Associate Professor of Apologetics at the Institute for Creation Research. Now, Dr. Johnson is also a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences and has brought profound insights into the intersection of history, science, and faith. His article, Viking Bones Contradict Carbon-14 Assumptions, explores the flaws in carbon dating and its implications for understanding historical timelines. Dr. Johnson, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, David. It's great.
Listen,
great to be here with you.
You know, and I love it when you're in studio, the stories that you tell and the way that you relate historical events back to not just biblical accuracy, but to divine providence is just astounding. But I appreciate you joining us here today because I'm looking over the article right now, and I just wanted you briefly to share how your background helps you identify errors when using science to understand the origins of life.
Well, anytime you're dealing with origins, you're talking about no longer observable events of the past, which means the uniformitarian assumption won't work. Much of what gets called science nowadays is empirical science, meaning somebody is observing something in the present. In fact, in theory, everybody can observe the same thing if they're in the right place at the right time. However, if you're talking about an event of the past that's no longer observable, and if it's unique, like the cause of something, whether it's what happened during Creation Week or the worldwide flood, or whether it's a traffic accident at the nearest intersection, those are events of the past and they're unique. So you can't make uniformitarian assumptions in order to figure out what happened. What you really need is a reliable eyewitness. And I've had years of practice as a litigator in federal and state courts since 1985. And then I've also served as a trial judge since 1990. And I've had an opportunity to use the rules of evidence in forensic contexts in order to determine what did happen in the past, and is there a reliable eyewitness to help determine what happened when you're making that inquiry.
Okay, so maybe you can break down a general discovery of findings. There were a number of skeletons discovered in England. Tell me what was found and then where the mystery came in with the dating.
Okay, a little more than 30 years ago, well, let's see, no, it's more than 30 years. Well, I better not do math in public. In the late 20th century, about 250 to 300 skeletons were found in a mass burial in the middle part of England. That's important. It's not on the coast, because when the Viking era began, the Vikings who were visiting England and doing snatch and run type attacks were busy along the coastlines. But within a century, many of them decided not to just grab stuff and then zoom away in their boats, but rather they intended to stay there over the winter. The winters in England a lot milder than in Scandinavia. So they had settlements in the interior part of England, and there was one in particular group called the Great Heathen Army. They were especially active in the 860s and 870s, and many of them, the historians believe, were buried in this mass burial in Repton, England, which is close to the center of England. But the biochemist who tested their bones for radiocarbon said, oh no, whoever lived in these skeletons must have died 100 or 200 years earlier than that, based on how much carbon-14 is left in these skeletons. And of course, that's assuming that there is a good understanding of how much carbon-14 should be left in the skeletons, measured by time, and that involves the half-life of decay for radiocarbon-14.
Interesting. So how do these 300 skeletons discovered in England relate to what we know from empirical science?
Well, here is the trick. Those skeletons were buried about more than 1,000 years ago, 1,150 years ago. If the chemists are right, those skeletons represent people who died in 600 or 700 AD. If the historians are right, and for 30 years this was an argument in academic and in the research communities, the historians said no, these skeletons, and especially some of the coins that are found with them, which they're kind of hard to evade the relevance of, they're from the late 800s. Finally, right around the turn of the century, a researcher came up with the clue and to solve the mystery, and here it is. All right, fish. The Vikings were eating lots of fish, salmon and cod and herring and trout, and that makes a difference in how much carbon-14 you get in your body, which eventually gets into your skeletons, because fish and other seafood, they don't have the same amount of carbon-14 that gets into plant-based foods, such as nuts, such as fruits, such as root vegetables, such as, well, we don't eat grass. However, we eat sheep who eat grass. So if radiocarbon-14 through the atmosphere is through photosynthesis getting into the plants, whether that be trees or whether that be grasses or other vegetables or fruits, ultimately all that carbon-14 makes it into our food chain, either directly by what we eat, nuts and vegetables and grains, or whether if we're eating herbivores, such as foods from cattle or sheep. So the assumption for 50 years at least was that everybody was eating a plant-based diet, and therefore you could use a certain formula of radioactive decay in order to figure out how long ago somebody had died based on how much carbon-14 was left in their bones. Well, in the case of the Vikings, since so much of what they ate was fish and other foods from the sea, in fact, even when they were eating swine, a lot of times it was common in Viking communities to eat the part of the fish, eat the part of the fish they want to eat, and then take the part they don't want to eat and just toss that out onto the ground, and that's what the pigs would eat. So later when the Vikings would eat the pigs, they were still eating a marine-based diet instead of a plant-based diet.
So in other words, every situation that they were encountering was literally changing the way that we would measure the carbon-14 and the way the assumptions that we would make.
Right, and one of the best ways I think of proving that was when they would dig up skeletons in Iceland, where they were able to find the skeletons with fragments of wool clothing. And of course, the wool came from sheep that only ate grass, a vegetable matter, whereas the Viking skeletons that they disinterred basically were mostly eating a fish-based diet. And so they could tell that these skeletons that had fragments of wool clothing, that the carbon-14 for the wool clothing that they're wearing was very different from the skeletons themselves. So they figure out, okay, we could probably figure out an adjustment that we can use based on the difference between these two readings, and then apply that in general to put a date on when these humans died and left their skeletons eventually to be their remains.
Wow. Okay, so is there a way to accurately prove the exact date that someone was born on, or is that a tricky thing to do?
Well, that goes back to forensic science, because when you think about it, when were you born? When was I born? Mm-hmm. For each one of us, that was a unique event of the no longer observable past. So this is basic forensic science. Namely, you can't look at me, I can't look at you and tell what day you were born. Mm-hmm. So how do we even know what day belongs on our driver's licenses or our passports?
Yeah.
There needs to be a reliable witness who was there when I was born, when you were born, so that we can know exactly what day we were born. Empirical science cannot test me and tell you when I was born. However, I am confident I know the day I was born because there was a reliable eyewitness there when it happened, my mother. And she took the whole thing very seriously, as I'm sure your mother did too. And as a result, that date got written down and was treated as a very important date. And that's been repeated and repeated. We have that from reliable eyewitnesses, kind of like the Bible. The Bible is God's reliable eyewitness account of what happened back in the past, no longer observable, unique events of the past, like the events of Creation Week, like the worldwide flood, like the resurrection of Christ. Those are all unique events of the no longer observable past. And frankly, we won't know the truth of what happened then unless there is a reliable eyewitness who can tell us in language that we understand what happened. And of course, that's what the Bible is. It is God's report. He is the ultimate reliable eyewitness. And so what he gives us in the Bible, we can know for sure. And frankly, a whole lot of that we would never know otherwise. We could make guesses.
Yes, incredible. Okay, so basically we have the ultimate eyewitness, the historical record that God himself inspired people to write down that has stood the test of time. In the last few seconds, how do the findings from these Viking skeletons relate to the biblical accounts we read in Genesis? What's our takeaway?
Well, our takeaway is do not underestimate the importance of a reliable eyewitness account of something that happened in the past that is a unique event, no longer observable today. And if you're talking about the events that are reported in Scripture, that's the only way we will know the truth of what happened. People can speculate their day and night for weeks and months and years and never get it right. But if we open the pages of Scripture, we get not only the report of a reliable eyewitness, but the perfect reliable eyewitness. He knows everything. He's always truthful. He has a perfect memory, and he's great at communicating.
By the one who knows it all. Thank you, Dr. Jim Johnson. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, David.
And that's it for today. I want to thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. Until next week, I want you to keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.